Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. The BRICS Summit is coming up again. It's early this year, thanks to the decision, I guess, of Brazil to fast track this year's BRICS Summit instead of having it later in the year as per usual. We'll talk about why that's taking place. And also, we're going to be discussing Brazil at large and what is going on in this country, because I think there's a lot of question marks right now. Okay, you've got elections coming up soon. You've got, of course, the China versus U.S. rivalry that is playing out all across Latin America, but especially in Brazil. Joining me today is Raphael Machado, who I think is someone better equipped to speak about all of this than just about anyone else. He's a Brazilian political scientist and lawyer serving as a columnist for the Strategic Culture Foundation, a member of Nova Resistencia, editor-in-chief of Ars Regia, and coordinator of the new Association Sovereignty think tank. So, Mr. Machado, thank you for being here. How are you doing?
Well, I'm excellent. Thank you for inviting me. Of course, it's an honor to be in your show because I have been watching it since it began, as a matter of fact. And, well, it's always a pleasure, though sometimes a bitter pleasure, to speak about Brazil right now.
Yeah, let's get into it. It seems like a bit of a touchy subject that many people don't want to really admit to, but you are a Brazilian patriot and you understand what's going on. You're not afraid to say what's going on. If you could, give me the rundown on what is happening in this Lula presidency, because it seems like it's a lot of nothing, and you have Lula, who's very... unfortunately, very old, he's got a lot of health issues. What is going on right now in Brazil?
Well, as a matter of fact, we could sum it up as a big bunch of nothing, because we all know that a lot of people had many expectations regarding the return of Lula, because we know that Bolsonaro's presidency was a letdown, because, of course, Bolsonaro is an extreme Zionist and excessively pro-USA, and that gave us some headaches regarding our foreign policy, regarding Venezuela, for example, regarding China, etc. So many of our international friends have good expectations, have high hopes regarding a new Lula presidency, because the first and the second one were reasonably decent in this foreign sphere. But some people, one of them, my organization, and other foreign comrades, as a matter of fact, we already had some info about Lula that gave us made us a bit suspicious about this return. Because we know that Lula was arrested some years ago with some corruption accusations, probably trumped up corruption accusations. I'm not disputing that, but it was very suspicious, the fact that he was released just a few months before the necessary term for you to register for elections, because the judges who released Lula were the same judges who arrested him, who confirmed his condemnation. So, well, why is Lula being released right now? We had the impression that with Bolsonaro as president of Brazil and Biden as president of the United States, there were some disagreements, some attrition between Brazil and the United States, and that some forces wanted another kind of president who would be maybe more easygoing with the United States, with Biden, with the White House. So the same elites who arrested Lula were a bit pissed off with Bolsonaro, because in his last year, Bolsonaro decided to become a bit closer to Russia because of the fertilizers, because of some other deals that Brazil was doing with Russia. And of course, because with Biden in the White House, Bolsonaro didn't want to get too close to the United States anymore. So the same elites, in our perspective, decided that, okay, now it's time for Bolsonaro to go, because Bolsonaro is a bit crazy, is a bit unpredictable. He didn't toe the line during the sanitary crisis, the health crisis a few years ago, just like, for example, Lukashenko, Maduro, etc. So the same elites decided now it's time for Bolsonaro to go. We need Lula back, but another kind of Lula. A Lula who is, well, he's old right now. He needs help. He needs more allies. So it was very weird because, for example, Lula came back with a broad front strategy. And the parties that were supporting him were basically the right-wing, ultra neoliberal parties of the 90s. For example, guys from the PSDB, the Social Democratic Brazilian Party, who actually ruled Brazil in the 90s, who sold basically all the strategic state enterprises of Brazil, the steel working businesses, all the major businesses. They didn't only sell Petrobras and some other very important businesses, but the guys who sold everything that Brazil had in the 90s, connected even to George Soros, for example, they were all supporting Lula this time. The NGOs, the international NGOs, the Hollywood actors, there was some propaganda in Times Square supporting Lula and condemning Bolsonaro in those big screens, etc. So it was very obvious for anyone to see, well, of course, maybe Lula has some good points in comparison to Bolsonaro, but he is coming with a team with backing that is extremely Atlanticist, extremely pro-Western. So nothing that happened during his government was a surprise, at least for me, for some other people. I know during the time there was some mutual friends of ours who were also doing some very important Lula criticism, and I was trying to help with some inside perspective. And well, the first thing that Lula did was put in the foreign minister, as foreign minister, Mauro Vieira, about whom I have some inside information, in the sense that I know from some important people in Russia that he is the kind of guy who doesn't like Russia, who is not really close to Russia, who prefers an alignment with the West. That's why, for example, during the first comments about the special military operation, Mauro Vieira had some tough things to say about the special military operation. He was very harsh in his criticism, basically accusing Putin of invading Ukraine, of starting a war, etc., and that Brazil was for the international law and demanded that Russia exited Ukraine. And I saw that and said, well, nothing surprising at all. I hope people start seeing all that's happening. And that was January. First month of Lula's government. And well, just to summarize, because I don't want to speak too much, as a matter of fact, there were a lot of small happenings that indicated the same thing. For example, the first trip of Lula to China, where I even had some expectations regarding this visit, because we have Brazil has the only microchips initiative in Latin America, which is the CEITEC, which is the only producer of microchips, of semiconductors in Latin America. But it was closed by Bolsonaro a few years ago. And there was some talks that Brazil was going to ask China for help, reactivating CEITEC, maybe for Brazil to sell semiconductors to China or something like that. But Lula came back with absolutely nothing regarding semiconductors, regarding the Belt and Road Initiative. Absolutely, only those same kinds of declarations and memoranda of understanding, etc., that say a lot without actually advancing nothing. We had, for example, the fact that during all this time, and yet Brazil has not yet recognized Maduro's victory in Venezuela. And during the election period, we even attempted to interfere in those elections, asking for free elections in Venezuela. Well, everyone knows what free elections actually mean when it's something that is demanded by the Organization of American States, for example, something demanded by the White House, etc. So we told the line there. It seemed as if Brazil had been chosen by the U.S. as a kind of lieutenant of the U.S. in South America, so that so that the U.S. doesn't interfere in South America, we are going to guarantee that everyone stays on the line below the U.S. So we attempted to interfere in Venezuela's election. Of course, we failed. And because of that, and because Maduro said he had some criticism about our government, about especially our foreign ministry, and about our election system also. And of course, just not to offend the United States, we also blocked the entry of Venezuela in BRICS. And I think that was the moment that a lot of people noticed that something was wrong, because the propaganda in Europe, in North America, in Eurasia even, especially among anti-imperialists, is that Lula is one of us, he is a great guy, he is the Brazilian Hugo Chavez, etc. He's never going to fail us, he's never going to betray us, etc., etc. And that was the first moment that our international comrades and colleagues noticed that something was actually wrong. But we, of course, were already paying attention. We condemned, for example, Daniel Ortega's government. We voted against Nicaragua in the Human Rights Commission in the United Nations. We had a lot of wrong positions regarding the special military operation. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because on a cultural level, on ideological level, Brazil is basically reproducing everything that is wrong with the West. We have absolutely draconian laws regarding LGBTQ and what we can actually say about these phenomena. I can't even go into details to explain it, because we have draconian laws that are even worse than French laws. And I already thought in the past that, oh my God, France is a dictatorship, because you can actually speak your mind about some sexual matters, some gender questions, some migration questions. But Brazil nowadays is worse. And of course, I imagine that Russians can't even imagine anything like that, because it's actually so different.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it leads me to the next question of, where does Brazil go from here? Because of course you have Lula, who's very old. Basically, he said, I God forbid I don't have to run, you know, again in 2026, October. You have Bolsonaro, who is, as I understand, currently barred from holding any elected office in Brazil or leaving the country as a result for the alleged coup that he, you know, they said he committed against a coup attempt he tried to commit against Lula. At that time, you know, these images of the protests were very big all across the world. Everyone left out the point where Senator Bernie Sanders from the United States admitted that the United States had CIA agents all across Brazil to try and protect Lula's victory, which is very odd. So where does Brazil go from here if it's not Bolsonaro and if it's not Lula, and Lula doesn't have a successor even?
Yes, all of that is very confusing. And it is also compounded by the fact that, well, maybe we could have all these problems and things would be better if at least the economy was on the right path. But not even on regarding economics, we are on the right path, because Lula's government is basically following the same neoliberal path that even Bolsonaro was following. Budget cuts, no public investment on anything, giving, not privatizing, of course, but making a lot of concessions to private enterprises, and the economy isn't growing. Actually, the economy isn't growing. The inflation is kept high. We have the highest interest rates in the whole world. We have interest rates that are comparable to countries in conflict, basically. I think nowadays only Russia has higher interest rates than Brazil, but it's a country it's in conflict, and of course the central bank needs to keep things in check so that the economy doesn't get out of control. But Brazil has almost the same interest rates in a country in peace. That's why, for example, for a guy with money, it's much more interesting to speculate, to put it on, to buy bonds, to buy interests in some businesses, foreign businesses, etc., than to open an industry, to create an enterprise that creates jobs, etc. In some sense, the United States suffers a bit with the same kinds of problems, but in Brazil, it's much more interest to invest in debt papers than anything else. So there's no way for the economy to grow like that. And that creates a lot of difficulties for Brazil in the future, because our industrialization process was stopped before it was even completed. So we are now passing through a deindustrialization, just like the US passed through in the 80s and 90s with Reaganomics, but we hadn't the time to take advantage of the industry we had at the time. Now, regarding politics itself, Bolsonaro, of course, we imagine he's not going to participate in the next elections. There's a strong lobby inside Bolsonaro's camp to, even though he can't participate, nominate him as candidate for the presidency. Just like Lula, even while arrested, nominated himself as candidate. And then, of course, it was denied. And then Fernando Haddad, who is the current economics minister, disputed with Bolsonaro and, of course, lost. Some people say that Bolsonaro is going to do the same thing. He's going to indicate a vice president and nominate himself as candidate. But when it comes to it, it is going to be the vice president who's going to be candidate as president. Some people say that that's going to be São Paulo's governor, who is Tarcísio de Freitas, who is also a neoliberal, extremely pro-Israel. He has the same problems that Bolsonaro had, probably without the good aspects, because he's also a pro-NGO, pro-woke, right-wing politician, which is a big problem. On the left wing, though, Lula never created a successor. He never even admitted or attempted at creating a successor. Years ago, we used to talk about some guys like José Dirceu or some other people who were arrested during the Operation Car Wash. And then, of course, their political career was extremely damaged, as a matter of fact. So everyone is saying that Lula is going to insist on participating in the next elections. But even inside the Workers' Party, there are a lot of people questioning that, because, well, it's a bit of a lie, because, of course, he's not going to be able to be at his full health, his full mental conditions until the end of the next presidential terms. And that's extremely problematic, because the older he gets, easier it is to influence Lula. Especially what we have seen here in Brazil, especially, and I have wrote about it for the Strategic Culture Foundation, is the very big influence that his wife, Janja, has over him. She attempts to participate in all high-level meetings at the BRICS summit, the G20 summit, even when the wives of the presidents are not allowed there. She always tries to be there. She speaks for him. Some people even say that the fact that she isn't coming to Brazil for the BRICS summit is because of the fact that his Lula's wife interfered in some dealings and talks that Lula had with Xi Jinping during Lula's last visit there, where she attempted to, she asked for the word in a moment that there's no nothing organized for it during the dinner. She asked for some minutes, and then she began talking that TikTok in Brazil is used by the extreme right wing, and that Xi Jinping needed to do something about it. Something completely insane. It was even the information was even given by some Lula's ministers who obviously got pissed off about it. They sold the info to newspapers in Brazil because they couldn't stand it anymore, because this is something that she's doing all the time. Even during Lula's, when he was inaugurated, she refused to greet the Iranian delegation during Lula's inauguration. So there is something extremely ideological about her. Some friends who are more of the conspiracy theorist kind, they insist that I think she has something weird going on about her that is not normal. There's something weird going on about Lula's wife, because she's always creating some trouble between Lula and the leaders of BRICS countries, of counter-hegemonic multipolar countries. So there's something weird about it. And on the other hand, she's all smiles and whatever when Lula meets Emmanuel Macron, for example. So Lula has been developing an extremely close relationship with Emmanuel Macron during this term. I think on an international level, the closest president to Lula, the closest leader to Lula is Emmanuel Macron on all levels. They have even danced together and did some stupid stuff together as if they were childhood friends. And that's
I remember the Valentine post where they had the two of them.
Yes, they were in the Amazon rainforest, and it looked like a marriage photo shooting or something like that. And that creates a lot of apprehension in Brazilian patriots. Even, and of course, I'm specifically talking about those who are not on Bolsonaro's camp, who are on a more neutral camp, who are Brazil first more than anything. Because, for example, we have the impression that Brazil doesn't take BRICS seriously, doesn't take BRICS as a priority, especially in the sense that BRICS could become a kind of tool, a kind of mechanism to revolutionize the international world order. Of course, on a public level, we know that Russia and China have always been saying that BRICS isn't a kind of alternative world structure, etc., etc. But of course, we know from a lot of people from the inside that the intention of many people is that beginning to create alternative institutions in BRICS that can be served as another possible path, and that could maybe influence the United Nations or influence the existing institutions to reform them, to maybe even be put in their place, for example, the IMF, etc., etc. So Brazil is absolutely, at least Lula and our diplomacy school, our diplomatic school, is absolutely against thinking about BRICS as a builder of a multipolar world order alternative to a Western dominated unipolar world order. This is something that was talked about this week Actually, when there was a professor here in Brazil that in an interview was talking that Brazil has no interest in going against the West, in going against the United States, and thinking about BRICS as counter-hegemonic structure, etc. Brazil, of course, wants to be in BRICS to participate in trade deals, to get more advantageous deals, to get money from BRICS banks, etc., but not to actually restructure the world order against the wishes of the United States. So Brazil, as a matter of fact, wants to be with one foot inside BRICS and one foot together with the European Union, together with the United States, etc. So where Brazil wants to go. As a matter of fact, the big problem is of an ideological character. In what sense? Brazil, the Brazilian elites, the Brazilian political, academic, cultural elites, they actually believed in the end of history narrative of the 90s. So everyone there actually believes that we are just one small step from the global village, the cosmopolitan world order, basically globalism. You know, as maybe when we are talking about Lula, a left-wing version of globalism, where, for example, Lula has demanded that the United Nations has executive power in the sense of being able to force nations to submit to the World Health Organization, to ecological dictates of the United Nations, etc.
Oh,
It's something absolutely insane, as a matter of fact. So,
and you guys have, sorry to interrupt, but you also have Dilma Rousseff as the chair director of the national or the new development bank, which is the BRICS Bank. And from what I've seen, she doesn't really seem to know a lot about, economics. It's just, when you look at this and you look at her and you look at the economists who are actually, I don't know, maybe giving her different proposals, like Sergei Glaziev, for example, there seems to be a very big disconnect there. I don't understand how Brazil is now in this position where they are basically just saying to hell with it with BRICS. They're saying we're going to prioritize the climate change, UN climate change event over BRICS. We're not going to join the Belt and Road Initiative. We are also going to have Dilma sitting at the chair of this, but she's not really doing anything either. I mean, it's really incredible.
Yes, my bet is that, and Dilma actually is on her second term on the bank. So, well, everyone thought that, well, Dilma didn't do much. She did some interesting things, but maybe now it's time for her to step down. And Russia and China are probably going to indicate someone else to for the new development bank. But as a matter of fact, she was kept on her place. Well, my opinion is that this is something that was done maybe to help keep Brazil, trying to keep Brazil interested in BRICS. Look, you have a space here. You are honored as one of our members. We are putting here Dilma Rousseff, who was also impeached on something that was suspiciously just like a coup d'état also. So we are honoring Dilma Rousseff as someone who deserves respect. Also, Brazil deserves respect. You have a place with us. So, well, the new development bank is yours again, so that you maybe develop some more interest in BRICS. But, well, first, there's the fact that we chose to do the BRICS summit now at the medium, the half of the year in July. I think it has never happened before because, of course, it's the correct thing to do, the reasonable thing to do is to do it at the end of the year, because then you had a whole year during your term as president of BRICS to advance things. For example, the last term of BRICS, there were a lot of advancements, there were a lot of proposals, especially regarding de-dollarization, which I think it's one of the most important projects that BRIC is involved in, because when we see what has happened to Iran and how the sanctions have actually do damage to Iran's economy and even Iran's defense capabilities, of course, because then it gets hard to get material to repair helicopters, for example, and we know that maybe that even influenced on what happened to Ibrahim Raisi. We know what happens with Cuba. We know what happens with North Korea nowadays, with Russia, even though Russia actually managed, because of its size, because of its resources, they actually managed to overcome sanctions. But for most countries, the biggest threat that the West can have is the sanction regime. Even for Brazil itself, what would happen if Brazil in the future actually manages to elect a nationalist president, a patriotic president that wants to create a nuclear bomb, for example? Of course, we would be under 1,000 sanctions that would break our economy because we are not self-sufficient right now. So I don't think there's anything more important than de-dollarization right now. And of course, during 2024, there were many interesting advances and proposals regarding de-dollarization. And I think that we need the whole year maybe to put something to practice, maybe to create some kinds of demonstrations of tests. Maybe we should test different models, different softwares, hardwares that could help in de-dollarization, and maybe we could show it by the end of the year, because I haven't heard anything about any kind of advancement during Brazil's term as president of BRICS. Absolutely nothing. Rigorously nothing regarding any advance in de-dollarization. I heard this week something about optic fibers for members, underwater optic fibers for members of BRICS, to guarantee an internet that is disconnected from Western optic fibers. And that's, of course, that's interesting, that's important. But on the major points, on the major questions, I haven't seen anything. I haven't even seen anything regarding admitting new members in BRICS.
No.
And why? Because Brazil is absolutely against new members in BRICS. Brazil opposed almost all the attempts, the previous attempts at including new members into BRICS, especially members like Venezuela, where we managed to veto, and also members like Iran or other extremely, I've heard from inside sources that Brazil was opposing allowing Belarus, for example, inside BRICS. And then I think that this structure of partners of BRICS was created exactly to allow these countries to get closer to BRICS without actually joining BRICS. Because, for example, Brazil, I've heard from very important inside info in Belarus that Brazil was the only country opposing the joining of Belarus to BRICS. We vetoed Venezuela, and we have been opposing new members in BRICS because our government and our diplomatic school says that, oh, that's going to make Brazil less relevant. Well, I don't hear China complaining about it. I don't hear Russia complaining about it. If Brazil gets less relevant with new members, it's Brazil's fault, because it's not doing its homework inside, and it's not the fault of, I don't know, of for example, Pakistan or Indonesia or North Korea, if in the future they want to join as official members of BRICS. So of course, there's nothing happening. We gave preference to the climate summit, to the COP30 that's going to happen in the Amazon rainforest, and it's not going to do anything about anything, because Well, the climate policy, the climate scheme advances, especially when the United States is promoting it. And now with Donald Trump in the White House, all of that's going to come to nothing, because the big force behind it all was Biden, as a matter of fact. Of course, before that, Obama. And we all know that there's a lot of private interests in there, from George Soros. Even oil industry sometimes helps promoting these kinds of stupid things. But when the president of the United States is absolutely against it all, it gets very hard for them to convince the countries to accept these climate dictates. Because, for example, we know that India, who is also very close to the United States, and that's also problematic, they are, of course, not going to help in the climate summit. The Arab countries are probably only going to pay lip service to the climate change scheme, etc. Because, as a matter of fact, they are being smart about it. They are talking about an energy transition, but to get money to invest on nuclear power, which is the absolutely only energy transition that is actually rational and revolutionary. But Brazil, no. Brazil wants to invite foreign private interests to invest in the Amazon rainforest, and to even get a bit parts of the Amazon rainforest. And meanwhile, we have been giving reservations to the indigenous people of Brazil. And I'm not against it. I'm not against creating indigenous reservations for Brazilian descendants of the indigenous people. But each reservation is the size of an European country. Each reservation is the size of Austria, of Switzerland, of Italy, even. And each of these reservations has 500 Indian, 500 natives, 1,000 natives, and always with a lot of mines, gold mines, diamond mines, uranium mines, cobalt mines, etc., etc., etc. And the state, in Brazil's laws, the state isn't allowed to enter the native reservations, the indigenous reservations. But the minerals, they exit. And we always see, for example, indigenous chiefs with pickups, with great, excellent cars, excellent, excellent resources. And, well, how are they getting all of that? What's happened to Brazil's minerals? And that's something that Lula doesn't pay attention to. It. On the opposite, he actually promotes it as a kind of historical debt that Brazil has with its indigenous reservations, because the NGOs convince him that Brazil needs to do it like that. So yes, I think that when we have on the one side Lula and on the other side Bolsonaro, we are in trouble. As a matter of fact, we are in trouble.
Well, I pray for the people of Brazil. I hope you all find your way out of this mess, because there's no other way to spell it than that. And I hope that you find your path to true sovereignty, because, like you said, that's exactly what Brazil needs to be able to develop its resources, its economy, and become self-sufficient. So, Raphael Machado, thank you so much for joining me today. Fantastic insight into everything happening in Brazil and across the world. As always, where should people follow you online if they want to stay up to date with your work?
Well, mostly on X. Right there, you can find me as Camarada Machado. I'm going to ask you guys to put my my address, my X address, when you publish the interview. It's basically on X. Of course, you can find Nova Resistencia on YouTube, on Telegram. I also have a personal channel on Telegram, Raphael Machado. You can find me there. And that's it. It was an honor being with you here, Jackson. And whenever you need me to talk about Brazil, maybe next year during the elections, we can get in touch.
Very good. Thank you so much.